are have a teacher. Yeah, like voting that leaders in
with we come out of the divided and all that. Thank you. And the people willing to time and program decision of man you all that of blessing and community more.
item projects. Yeah. Being that
We have to like the council, Fraser. Second, relation to my great Simon in relation to Mac and our yes, the
raised.
Yum. I'm
back to and send time. Yep.
Two to the reason. Okay. On
See opposed. Other
and see of the Fraser Council. So traffic. All of want to sign that we've seen and actually to see
the petition. That
my apologies for not agenda. In the
and is there any
doing that, real gender people know that
Light, Councillor up to
on conflict. They've vote
again the same agenda. Council or by discussion. I move in the trust where the Councillor for being amended.
that the arts and resolution. It's not. It was. In 16, it never appeared on the open resolution. So, yeah. So I don't know whether how we can go about. I'm moving that the outstanding item from the meeting held on the 28th of September 2016.5 be added to the open resolution register.
Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Truscott. That is right. There was a resolution on that day that should have been on the outstanding of the open resolutions register in relation to RVs, and that's an oversight, and take responsibility for that, and we'll ensure that it's included in the next agenda.
I
Okay,
think just in
so-
all fairness too, that I don't think you necessarily need to take full responsibility considering you weren't the CEO at the time, just to clarify.
So if we can just work through what your motion is, then it'll be that the open resolution register of February 2019 be accepted with the amendment of the inclusion of, do we have the, like,
Meeting number
Motion
11,
or there should be a resolution number.
So, with, the amendment to include the outstanding resolution, from ordinary meeting number 11 held on Wednesday, the 28th of February.
September.
2016, in relation to
item 5.
item 5.
Yeah.
So there's not, the resolution's not actually identified as like resolution
you want me to
17?
read- you want me to read
Oh, no, I just wanted, do we actually identify the actual resolution by number, or we just got to refer to, we'll refer to how it is in the actual agenda, the agenda item in the,
Just say
yeah.
item 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that happy?
I'm
Yep.
satisfied
Is there a
with
seconder for that? Councillor Mattern, is there any discussion? Do you want to just indicate what the motion was that,
Certainly, thank you, Mr Mayor. So in September 2016, we made some changes to allow additional RV spaces in Maryborough at the Allen and June Brown car park, and also at the site that's become the Doon Villa RV site at the Maryborough Airport. That fifth item of there was that following the implementation of all of those changes, that a review be conducted approximately 6 months after that time. And of which then, following that, the council would then look at tendering out further suitable locations such as Prickett Park, and looking at alternatives for the HJ Davies and McDowell car parks as well.
okay. So we have a mover and a seconder for it amended, so we'll go back to, we haven't really discussed the actual, Councillor Taylor?
I just have a question in relation to item, or page 36 and page 37, request from Department of Transport and Main Roads, Urangan. It does have the last entry as September 17, September 17?
The earliest one.
Oh, so we're going...
Yeah, that's the earliest one.
Yeah, so it is on the agenda. Just ignore my question, it's already answered. I'm reading it backwards.
All right, any further comments on the register? Not, I'll put the motion as amended. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.1, preparation for 2020 quadrennial local government elections. That's page 59. Yes?
In relation to the report, it talks about the variations being electorates, divisions 3, 5 and 8, and that's a recommendation we've forwarded to, is that the local? So it's talking about review, but it's actually, is it fair to say that also 1 and 4 are also very close to being outside that range as well? Should that be included in the, is acknowledged in the actual report?
Did you want to speak to that? Yep.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for your question. The recommendation, in particular item 4, says that council considers the changes in numbers enrolled in each division and recommends to the Minister for Local Government, Racing and Multicultural Affairs that a review of electoral boundaries be undertaken. They will take that matter into consideration. So I don't believe that the actual boundaries have to be stated in the resolution. We've done the review as required, and we can refer that now to the state government for them to consider.
Yeah, sorry, it was just that when it referred to the electoral enrolments for the 31st of January, indicate that divisions 3, 5 and 8 are outside the reasonable electors, and then council, on page 61, council is required to notify the minister and the electoral commissioner of these results prior to the... So it makes it sound like they're going to notify the minister that that those 3 are outside the quota, but you're saying that the actual resolution is just asking for. So I was just trying to understand the legislative requirement that makes a council have to advise the minister and the electoral commissioner of the variances outside that 10%.
Because we should let them know about 7 and 4 as well.
Yeah.
Like 4 is clearly right on the line.
I'm mindful that if it's a legislative requirement to notify the minister, that potentially we should actually indicate that. But that's something that can be dealt with outside of this resolution in the dialogue with the minister. But I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah. Okay, so the recommendation is on page 60. Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question, just to make sure, as it was raised just before about that it has to be advised to the minister prior to the 1st of March, and considering that is only this Friday, just to make sure that we do have the capacity to be able to send that straight away.
Yeah. Councillor oh no, I thought you were leading on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, while we're doing this, I'd like to wonder if the council, we can sit down and just have a look at some of our realignment of some of our areas to, because we've got the vision beside mine. There's up around Paul area, I look after half of the street, half of the side, and the other side is
That's right, yeah.
looked
Maybe
after
we
by
should-
another council.
Yeah, about N1 and 2, there's areas out at Rowena where neighbours should be in the same division.
I just think that while we're doing this, is all councils, we all come together and we have a look at the map and we see how we're going to handle it all, so it makes it a lot easier for it.
Yeah, it would obviously just be a recommendation from us to the AEC, or the ECQ. It's done very
Thank you.
at arm's length from us, yeah.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I agree. I thought that, that we have intimate knowledge of our divisions over the years, and we certainly could put some substance into any recommendations into ECQ.
Mr Mayor, my understanding is that the ECQ will make a boundary alignment recommendation and then there will be an opportunity for consultation on that.
That's how it would normally work, is they would put out the new maps and they would ask for public, that's what they do at a federal level, certainly, and state. Yeah,
They've done that at the state level, so that's just happened with the state Maryborough boundary realignment. There is an opportunity for
Yeah,
consultation.
would, yeah.
The Tyro community, I think, put in a fairly strong submission and they were actually included back into the
Yeah,
Maryborough
Maryborough,
electorate. So the opportunity for consultation will be when the ECQ provides the boundaries.
Mr Mayor, I think it's important to define, based on the timeframes, that this is about a notification
Yeah,
to
a
the minister and a specific recommendation. I'm not sure whether any other aspect of boundary alignment should fall part of this, but potentially once the matter's been referred to the minister, we can look at those. But right now, I think the resolution needs to be clear on what we're trying to achieve.
perhaps when we advise the minister, we can say that, well, because I'm not sure if there's the same process for
If
local
they
laws.
follow the same process
Okay,
as
so we
they
will
do
get
at the
opportunity.
state, and I don't know for
Okay.
sure, but I would expect
Okay.
that they do, they
Alright, so we'll
will,
get that
they
in
will
due
make
course.
their assessments, they will draw their boundary, and then it will come out for consultation, and then anyone, either us or anybody else, is allowed to put in a submission around that boundary alignment, and then a final decision is made prior to the election.
That's right, yeah. Okay, any further comments before I ask for, is there a mover for this? So again, the recommendation is on page 60. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Taylor? Is there Councillor Madden? Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.2, the organisational performance report. That's page 64. Did you want to speak to this? No, you have it, yeah. Is there a mover for the recommendation on page 3? Would it be accepted? Councillor O'Keefe, is there a seconder? Councillor Light, any discussion, any questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. Item 10.2.3, the entertainment and hospitality policy, page 79. This requires some discussion. Yeah.
Can I, just in relation to a number of the policies that are in here, I understood that there was a clear indication that in relation to any amended policy that it should read draft on the actual document. That was something that we were asking for a consistent process to make sure that any document that has yet to be adopted by council should always carry the watermark of a draft on it. Sorry? Yeah, so just for,
Yeah, a watermark,
sake-
yeah, that should be a course of action, yeah.
it should, yeah.
So the officer's recommendation is that the amended entertainment and hospitality policy attached to this report be adopted by councillor. Councillor, is there a mover for that? Councillor Chapman, is there a seconder? Councillor Madden, any discussion or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.4, customer behaviour policy, page 87.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the officer's
Councillor
recommendation.
Madden is moving the recommendation on page 87. Is there a seconder? Councillor Truscott?
Point of order.
Yes?
Mr Mayor, my recollection is that this was laid on the table.
Oh,
And
sorry,
I think
that's
under the
right.
standing
I'm
orders,
sorry.
we'll need a motion that the matter be
Okay.
taken from the table.
Are you moving that the matter be taken off the table?
I'll move.
Okay, Councillor Lewis has moved that item 10.2.4 be taken off the table. All in favour? Or is it, what's the actual motion? It's be returned to the table? Because we laid it on the table. Taken from the table, yeah, so I had it right, yeah. Okay, all in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And so it's moved by Councillor Madden, second by Councillor Truscott. Is there any discussion?
The only thing I'd like to say is that it was drawn to my attention yesterday that there are staff in our council who are very appreciative of this move. I think it's terribly important because some of our staff face some pretty rough situations, particularly compliance staff. So, you know, I was pleased to hear that staff were pleased to know that we were considering them.
Yeah, and this is a policy which really should have been in place. I mean, it's amazing there isn't an existing policy. Any company, any organisation would have a policy that looks after the welfare and fulfills its obligations to its own staff. I mean, just because somebody is working as a parking inspector, a planning officer, a customer service officer, an inspector who has to go to somebody's house, that doesn't make them a punching bag. I mean, I remember when I used to work in community services, child safety officers had to position their car when they arose so they could get away quickly. Like, there are dangerous jobs, and employers have to look after their workers. I've seen some of the correspondence that our staff gets, and if we didn't have some sort of policy, I think we'd be extremely negligent in terms of allowing our, staff to be bullied, to be harassed, and threatened. I mean, actually, I'm talking about literally their lives threatened. So this is something that we obviously should have had a long time ago. I'll just ask the CEO to, you've got one of the recent correspondence that we've got here, which I just think, do you want to read from that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for considering this matter. This is a normal, a policy that's normal in most local governments, and it's something that's necessary for our local government to show that we are caring for the mental health and well-being of our staff. I know I'll draw attention to council to what we determine as bad behaviour. So we're talking about aggressive behaviour, rude, abusive behaviour, or behaviour that's threatening or defamatory, repetitive in nature, persistent, excessive and unnecessary. I understand that anger is an acceptable emotion, but as long as it's expressed in a reasonable way. There are two issues that impact our staff greatly. Firstly is some of the language and the emails that are received, correspondence received. And I'll use this as an example, and I won't say the actual words, but I'll use the first letter of those words. So this is an example of an email that's been received by our council officers. You and your council are all effing corrupt. How about you get off your lazy pencil-pushing asses and create work for those that effing want the work? This is a shit sea of a town. You and your team members are all effing corrupt. And it goes on, and one of the words, one of the sentences is, kill yourself, C. Just another section in here is, let me just find this, UF steal money left, right and centre, low life scum sees, and that's just in a short, this is a very short piece of correspondence, and that's probably half of the abusive, vile language that our staff receive, and that is, in my mind, is unacceptable. And what makes it even more unacceptable is when it's repeated over and over and over again. The other concern that we have is where we have members of the public that legitimately raise concerns, and we respond, and we have continued emails, in some cases over 500 emails in relation to one matter, even after it's been dealt with by the Ombudsman or Triple C, because the resident's not comfortable or happy with the response. That draws a considerable amount of resources, because every piece of correspondence has to be considered on its merits, and we can't just simply ignore. This policy formalises in a transparent way the actions that I'm able to take to ensure that the mental health and safety of our staff is protected.
Just a point of clarity and I guess procedure is that we've actually had a motion that was on the table that was moved by Everard and Truscott on page 88. It's now been taken off the table. They should be the same people that motion is still on the table. It's now the motion. So therefore, Everard and Truscott would have to agree to amend that motion to that council adopt and take out unreasonable and replace it with the word adopt the amended customer behaviour policy, the same number as per attachment 1, and then you can take out with minor amendments, and that would then make sure that the actual motion that was originally put forward is actually the motion that we're voting on.
You're quite right. You're being very helpful today.
There's another word. There's another word for that, but it's important that we get it right.
Okay, sorry. So there is actually a motion already there. So Councillor Everard and Councillor Truscott, are you happy to amend your motion to what it is now?
So just for Marlene's sake, it would then read that council adopt the amended customer behaviour policy number 3628794 as per attachment 1. And I'm assuming it's, yep.
Same number?
Yep, it is. 3628794, yep.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I just want to share my full support for this initiative. I think it's great, and as you mentioned, yeah, it's surprising we didn't have it before, but that's fine. It's here now, and that's the main thing. Having been an employee on the front line before, I know firsthand some of those sort of experiences as described by the CEO, and they are certainly unpleasant, and no one in those public positions should have to be subjected to that. You've been in the same position I have, you would have experienced it as well, and it's certainly unpleasant, and I support the safety and well-being of our staff, and yeah, fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make the comment that I think it's a very good thing that the officers have appended to the agenda the advice from McDonald's law. That advice, I think, is a very patient and sensible piece of advice, and I think it will help the public to understand, if they want to read that document, it'll help them to understand the background and indeed the care which has been taken with this policy. And so I want to commend the officers for their work in producing this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I will be supporting this policy. What it does is, if someone does look like stepping over the line, at least we've got the grounds to show that we've got a policy to what we act to, and then we can give them the copy of that policy and say to them that this is the policy that we work to. If you can't work to that, this is the circumstances. It sets it out very clear, and I think it's a great move. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, now I was obviously one of the councillors who raised concern with the initial policy. I think laying it on the table and seeking that advice, the legal advice from McDonald's Law was a very valuable process, both in forming a better policy, but also informing councillors and the community, and I think that was a good outcome. I would just make the note that and it's a minor thing, but on pages, for example, 92, 93, and 94, on 92, it's before management of unreasonable behaviour. There's a 1 there that sort of is there. There's a 2 in authority under 7. There's a 2 in the first point that probably needs to be removed, and also on page 94 there's a 3 just before 10 reviews. Obviously that was a formatting issue, but it probably needs to be taken out before it is formalised.
So are you happy to, are the movers happy to make their motion subject to formatting issues? So, I mean, it's not really part of the policy, but it's formatting issues. Whether, I mean, it's like it being printed on A4 rather than A3, yeah.
It's formatting.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.5, support for increase in federal funding. That's page 104. Councillor Chapman, you moving this? Councillor Everard's the one who's always talking about this. Okay, seconded, yeah. Did you wish to speak to this motion? Yeah.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I think that federal or state, any funding that we get as a local government is a big help to keep our community moving along and moving forward. And as we're such a growing community, we need infrastructure, we need facilities to cater for our population, our growth, and we've got to be in front of that. And the only way we're going to do that is ask for more funding through the federals and governments. And I'm very proud to move this motion to try and achieve more funding for this region.
Yeah, thanks. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Everard?
Yeah, just yeah, couldn't help myself. Yeah, yeah. Look, this is good leadership by the LGAQ to come out and lobby for this. Yeah, as Councillor Chapman said, like we require the assistance. We've got some significant projects, and you know, for too long, I think we as the Fraser Coast have missed out. So it's good that the LGAQ's has led the charge for all the Queensland councils.
Any further speakers? Councillor Taylor?
Just by way of clarity in relation to the financial and resource implications, it refers to the I guess the benefit if we were in relation to the grant the granting increase, I understand, but it doesn't actually stipulate when you talk about the officer's recommendation to support the campaign of 1%. It doesn't actually refer to the cost, unless I'm reading it wrong, of the actual support.
We're not envisaging any cost from, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Taylor. The supporting the campaign doesn't incur any cost. It's simply council passing a resolution, and the LGAQ will use the resolution that's passed by this council and other councils in their campaign, their coordinated statewide campaign and national campaign to get a greater share of federal assistance grants.
And I just make the point that from my previous employment, the term of 1%er is a different term altogether. Hopefully we won't be tarred with the same outlaw brush because we're asking for 1%. So.
Yeah. And no further speakers. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.1, the Regional Arts Development Fund Round 1 recommendations. That's page 106. There's a recommendation over page 106 to 107. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any speakers to this? No? No? You're the arts person? No? No? So, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.2, the endorsement of Works for Queensland Round 3, proposed project list to the Department of Local Government Racing and Multicultural Affairs. And that's on page 112 with a recommendation on that page. Councillor Sanderson, are you moving this?
No, Mr Mayor, I'll be big pain to my colleagues right now, and I apologise to the CEO. I'll declare, you did say in relation
Yeah.
to this item,
Yeah.
I totally don't think I have one, but to be overcautious, I'd rather do that. My wife, she helps manage an op shop in Biddeford Street. This Campbell Street's near there. It's going the other way. She doesn't own the property. There's no benefit to her in any way at all. But as a matter of caution, I'll raise that as a perceived conflict. How I'll deal with that is I'll stay in the room, of course, and would ask my colleagues to make a vote on that. I apologise to Councillor Taylor. I didn't believe it was a conflict, but it'll have to be voted on.
So which project number is it again?
That's 28.
28, Campbell
Yeah.
Street, Torquay.
Just a footpath. Just a footpath.
So a new concrete, yeah.
She
And so
only
your
manages
wife
an op shop.
volunteers at an
Yeah,
op shop.
that's right.
Yep.
So this brings back to Councillor Taylor's issue.
Yeah.
Can he, as part of the resolution, declare that he doesn't have a conflict, and also that his vote be removed from the two preceding, because the issue here is that the legislation says that we should not vote on matters that we have a conflict on. That's the legislation. A way to circumvent that is not to declare it at the last moment.
Yeah.
So we have to go back and do the process properly, because the people who wrote the legislation thought it was important to do this. So the best way to overcome that is to ask, through a resolution, is for his vote to be removed.
Can we do that? Can we take his vote out of those ordinances? Yep. Okay, and I want to again say that don't let any of this prevent you from declaring anything at last moment. If you find out at the very last minute, even if we have taken those votes, it's much better for you to declare. Less likely, yeah. Okay, so I will move that Councillor Sanderson does not have either a real or perceived conflict of interest in the matter and is accordingly free to vote, free to participate in the meeting while agenda item 10.3.2 is discussed, including by voting on the matter, and further that his vote be withdrawn from the earlier votes on this. Councillor Madden and Councillor Light's votes. And it's possible, yeah. Okay, is there, we don't need a seconder for that, do we? Seconded, Councillor Truscott. I'll put the motion, all in favour? No, you can't. All opposed? So that will be 8, you know, okay. Yeah, well, it was 8. It was 8, 8-0 unanimous, like the other two are now. Okay? All right, yeah. Yeah, that's right, it's working well. Okay, so going back to the recommendation on page 112, is there a mover? Councillor Everard, is that seconded by Taylor? Is there any discussion? Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah,
Councillor
just,
Everard?
ongoing thanks to the state government, the Queensland government for this program. These funds will be wisely spent.
Thank you. Any further speakers? The seconder, any further speakers about the project list? Councillor Sanders?
No,
Yeah.
I'm very excited for these projects, and I think it's, as we always are, great for the support of state government, but there's some very, very exciting projects in this list, and I'll bring specific reference to, as we know, the small water play area and the all-ability playground. This is a huge step forward for us as a council in relation to all of them, but excited for this to be progressed, and I urge my councillor colleagues to support this.
Yeah, this is a significant amount of money, and we've done that we've done through the Works for Queensland. I think you know, this demonstration of working with the state government pretty well in terms of identifying projects in Maryborough and in Harvey Bay and much broader, including toilets on Fraser Island. So I think in this list we're achieving quite a lot for the community. Councillor Madden?
Mr Mayor, I think probably one of the things I'd like to point out here is that the parameters of these grants are allowing us to do work which we would need to do normally, which is the renewal of some very old assets in Maryborough. And while this looks like it's Maryborough heavy, Maryborough is the old town with the old assets, and this particular grant process allows us to do these works which would ordinarily have to be funded by the ratepayer through the ordinary rates process. So from that, there's going to be a lot of underground work, there's going to be a lot of frustration in town, but people it's important because otherwise we're going to have to fund it out of rates. And I'm really grateful that this grant program actually allows us to do something we have to do anyway.
That's right, yeah. Okay, any further speakers? Not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Just a procedural question,
Yes.
Mr Mayor. Marlene, could you advise who moved it, who, obviously we had the mover as the mayor, but who seconded the conflicts relating to both councillor? For both times? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. The next item is 10.5.1, the Wide Bay Water and Waste Services Quarter 2 report, pages 121. So Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Mattern. Was there any discussion? Yep. Okay, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. We're done. Supplementary. I'll move to the supplementary agenda. Item 16.1.1, adoption of the amended budget, page 271. There's a recommendation on page 271 that in accordance with sections 169 and 170 of the local government regulation, council adopt the amended budget for 2018-2019 as detailed in attachment 1. Is there a mover for that?
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Chapman, seconded
that's all
by
right, I'll second it.
Councillor second Mattern. Is there any discussion? You what? No?
Just to thank the staff for a whole lot of work, and very detailed work that they provided to us in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Chapman.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to say what Councillor Madden said about the staff's work here. The staff have been very clear with answering questions and helping us out to try and understand of where the budget, how it's all working and everything like that. And it's a big part of a council to run a budget and to let us know where we really are. And I just think that for what I've seen, they're doing a great job, and I will be supporting this.
I'll put the motion, moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Mattern. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 16.1.2, again in the supplementary agenda, page 313, for expressions of interest for land for Maryborough Administration Building. The recommendation is over page 313 to 314. Is there a move? Councillor Truscott, seconded Councillor Chapman. Do you wish to speak to it?
Sure. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think as I mentioned at the previous meeting where we discussed about the demolition of the current administration building, that we were presented with a terrific opportunity to look further as to what we may be able to explore in Maryborough for a further administration centre, or perhaps looking at library or other options as well. So I think this is a great addition to that, and I look forward to seeing what results we get out of this expressions of interest system program, and seeing how or what may be able to be utilised throughout the Maryborough area to breathe some life either into some old buildings, but make something a new and modern space. I look forward to this process.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, yep.
Just want to get clarity from the CEO in relation to the expression of interest and how the process would work in relation to bringing the scope back to council for consideration, or is the delegation complete in the CEO?
Thank you, Councillor Tard, for your question. The second recommendation provides delegated authority for the CEO to determine the scope and invite expressions of interest for the sale of land within Maryborough CBD for the purpose of determining most suitable location. So it's not envisaged that the scope would come back to a council meeting for approval. There's no legislative requirement for the scope to come back to a council meeting for approval, but it's my intention to bring that back to a councillor briefing for the councillors to review, and if there's concern in relation to that scope, well then I would bring it back to council for determination.
for clarity, we will see the scope before it goes out, and then if any council has an issue, they can place it on the agenda for further consideration.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we at? So, we got a mover and seconder, so that was, sorry. All in favor, yeah. I'll put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. I think that's the rest, that's the end of, so we're moving on to general business. Is there any general business? Councillor Truscott?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I had two questions on notice, if I may.
Yep.
Yep. I mentioned before about the RVs issue, and that's sort of where my questions are heading with this. As we've seen and heard, we understand the benefits that are flowing into the region because of the provision of RV-friendly facilities in Maryborough now. But as proponents of it, some of us have been frustrated that the proposed expansion of RV facilities with the emerging flow-on benefits beyond retail has not really occurred and has been delayed. As we discussed, item 5 of the original resolution from September 2016 didn't make it onto the open resolutions register, and I understand that there is an investigation being undertaken as to how that happened. As we know, tourism in our region is of incredible importance, and last year was the first year that we got to experience a full peak season of RVs coming in, because in 2017 it sort of only started about halfway through. I wanted to find out, with the RV strategy that's currently being undertaken, that it started, I believe, early last year, and to advise, if I could please be advised, who the consultant is and that's been designated to undertake the RV strategy, and what credentials and experience they have in this field. That was the first one I wanted to ask. So the CEO or the director?
That's the director.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. The consultant that was engaged in, well, firstly I'd say it's correct, the engagement happened in February 2018, so 12 months ago now the consultancy was entered into. It's with a company called EarthCheck. They're probably the preeminent expert in terms of this area, noting that it is a relatively new, I suppose, area of tourism development. But EarthCheck have done all the work for the state government on the camping options paper, which is what I suppose led the way in terms of councils being able to look at reserves for these kinds of RV-friendly type operations. So they were deliberately chosen because they essentially advised the state government on the framework that any decisions we need to make going forward will have to operate within. There's been a couple of versions of the draft strategy, which is with officers at the moment. We'll be coming to the executive within the next month, and then we'll have that in front of council at this table. I suspect at our April meeting. It may make the March meeting, but I suspect it'll be the April meeting. So EarthCheck have done work already, similar pieces of work for a number of Queensland councils, noting they're all have their individual challenges. Some of the smaller rural and regional councils don't have some of the challenges we have because they don't have commercial, operators in the caravan space, which we do have. So it's a more challenging dynamic to get through some of the state government rules when you have a strong commercial sector as well, which we do have. And some of the I suppose reason why we've taken our time on this is to try and get that balance right, because there is a lot of competing views and priorities, and we want to make sure that we capitalise on all of the opportunities, but also provide opportunities for the commercial sector who those who do want to operate in this RV space.
I did have a second question, but you've answered it in that one about when it will come back, so I look forward to that. Thank you.
Is there any other, Councillor Light?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On a couple of notes of interest, just recently, only last week, I had the opportunity to go to Yeppoon with our disaster coordinator, one of our senior staff members, and also a consultant that we've engaged to look at a coordination centre. Yeppoon has got one that they got through, I believe, state and federal funding for. To say that it was incredible to see this building, state-of-the-art, the thought and the consideration to many aspects of disaster management's been taken on board, but also how they incorporate the building with their residents and living space and parks right next to it is just amazing. Free Wi-Fi, meeting spot for non-for-profit groups, and also that they actually are making money out of it through leasing that off as a conference facilities for a number of different entities. So the consultant that had worked in the fire service in Europe and other places and worked for NATO, and some of the stories he's got is quite interesting in disaster management for NATO, he was generally impressed. So I think that if he was impressed with it, it certainly speaks volume. It's something that this council needs to look at, and it certainly gives us a lot of capacity in the disaster management field, but also the education. They actually run events with the school kids to run a disaster out of this coordination centre, and the kids are given different roles, and it's quite educational for them, so it was really, really, really good. Also too, I've seen an influx, it's very encouraging through my business to see the number of new residents is quite astounding, and one of the things that they're saying to us or to me is that it's very consistent what they're saying. It's a dream to move to the Fraser Coast. They've come up here for holidays over years, several years. They've always wanted to move here, and sometimes we might take for granted this incredible place we live in. But I can tell you that there is certainly, we see that with the divisional maps and increase in population. One final thing, just a question of the CEO. Regarding, there has been, I believe, staff that we've sent to other areas of North Queensland. If you'd like just to touch on that for the chamber, if that's possible. Sorry to put you on the spot, Mr CEO. Just to indicate the Fraser Coast Council's willingness to support these other areas.
Thank you, Councillor Light. A lot of North Queensland, northwestern Queensland has been absolutely devastated by the recent rain events that they've had, and unprecedented flooding in a number of areas, which has caused widespread destruction of property and stock. As we do in local government, we help each other out. So we care for our community, but we also care for other local government communities. Through contacts through LGAQ, we made contact with Local Government Association of Queensland, and I made contact with the Mayor of Flinders to see what, if anything, our local government might be able to do to help. Local Government Association of Queensland is coordinating assistance from other local governments throughout the state. I put it to my staff that if they were interested in working in these flood-impacted areas to nominate, and we had more than 15 staff that said that they would like to volunteer in these flood-impacted areas. From that, the most immediate need was for someone that had experience in disaster recovery events and for a health surveyor. So we sent 2 of our staff last week. I saw them off, and they've headed out to out west, and I think to Flinders Shire, and they'll be there for a period of about 5 to 7 days. And I expect over the next few months that we will have a number of staff that will move to these areas on a rotating basis to provide help and assistance. You know, in these smaller rural local authorities, it's important to remember that a lot of the people that work in the council also have farms, have livestock, and to try and manage the recovery effort for the local government as a whole and to cope with the impacts of the flood to their farm and the death of their livestock and the destruction of property is really a traumatic experience for them, and my heart goes out to them. I'm not quite sure how they're managing to undertake these flood recovery works and deal with their own devastating personal experiences. So I'm glad and I'm proud that our council is probably the first council to have staff go into these more remote areas to provide assistance.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can I just add one more point? It was remiss of me. I'd like to thank the staff with the potential of the cyclone that decided to play a lot of tricks on us. I'm very proud to be part of that team. Our staff are exceptional, and we lead the way. And I know the state particularly was very satisfied with our planning efforts before the event and during the possible event. We had moved all our chess pieces around with other agencies, all the emergency agency, and there's so much that goes behind the scenes. So I'd like to thank all the directors and the CEO for that, and we should be very proud of that we are ready to react.
Yeah. And thank you for your leadership throughout last week. The worst, didn't happen, but we were prepared for the worst. At one stage they were talking, the possibility of a Category 1 making landfall here, and 100 millimetres of rain every day over 4 days. And we were, your team was, and Councillor Taylor as the Deputy Chair, were prepared. So we were prepared for the worst. Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr Mayor and councillors, I'd just like to make an aware to you that about a group of people, doctors and cancer people that are working in Hervey Bay. They're looking at developing a hospice. We've got a great aged population in this area. I was asked to go along to one of their meetings at the start of it, and next thing I saw in the minutes that I was a member of their committee. But it is just eye-opening to see, like Toowoomba have got a hospice, Ipswich, they're all over the place. And when you listen to these doctors on how they've got people that have only got 1 and 2 weeks left in their life, and they've got terminal illness, and their carers, their partner who's been probably with them all their life, cannot care for them anymore, cannot get them out of bed, and the only thing we can do in this area is virtually put them into a hospital bed. Yeah. So a hospice is somewhere that someone can go with dignity,
palliative stuff,
and end their life. It makes me sad to see that this is how people have got to end their life after serving our communities, and I just think that this is a great thing for the Fraser Coast. I've actually I'm having a meeting with Warren Trust to see if he could be an honourable member towards this project, and I just think there's great need for. I've actually spoken to the CEO about getting the council involved in this project, but there's just for such a community with such an older population, these doctors are saying that it just breaks their heart to say to their carers and their wives of some of these gentlemen and some of their husbands of their wives that you're going to have to go into hospital, and that's where you're going to end up. And it's sad, but I'd just like to, if anyone hears of anything or if knows of any way of supporting this project, when we look into these hospices, they're actually funded, a lot of it, by the state government. The state governments per year, I think Toowoomba put about $1.2 million into running their hospice, and that is to care for their community. So that's $1.2 million that's going to come into our health system, and one of our major parts in our community here is our health system. So I really think that we need to think about helping this group. So I just thought I'd make an awareness to the councillors and to the community that this is a project, and I really feel it'll get off the ground and get running very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further general business? If not, that's the end of the open business. We'll need to go into confidential for items 15.1 and 15.2 under section 275H of the Act for business for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government or someone else, or enable a person to gain a financial advantage, and item 15.2 under section 275G of the Act, any action to be taken by the local government under the Planning Act, including deciding applications made to it under that Act. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Chapman. I'll put that motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously, 10-0, because Councillor Taylor is not in the room. We only had one set of supplementaries, didn't we? Yeah. Thank you. During confidential, we discussed items 15.1 and 15.2. We'll go to 15.1. Do we have a mover for that? That's moved by, what is that? Chapman and seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any speakers? So, I'm sorry?
That's with subsection C in it.
Do you want
That's
to read out the motion?
The motion includes the addition of the following paragraph.
Subsection C under 2, that the parcel resumption is limited to approximately 2,400 metres squared, immediately adjacent to Murphy's Shipyard hard stand area.
Okay. Yep. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next item is item 15.2, and that's moved by Councillor Mattern, seconded by Councillor Chapman. Are there any speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. That concludes the agenda items. Were there any further matters I didn't get to? If not, I'll close the meeting at 11:30. Thank you. Yeah, 6:20.